Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as I do each and every week. This is episode 118. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. We have reached Thanksgiving week. A quick programming note for you. Even though you're getting this episode the day before Thanksgiving of 2020, there will not be a new episode next week. Because as you are listening to this, I am getting my daughter home from Ballet Conservatory in North Carolina. So I am going to spend the Thanksgiving week and next week spending time with her. Just really looking forward to that. So no new episode next week, but you are getting one here the day before Thanksgiving. I hope everybody's having a great week out there. We're having a great week here at the Drum Shuffle. We have a fantastic interview for you today. I am going to be joined by the legendary journalist, Robyn Flans, right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com, follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned, we're going to be joined by the great Robyn Flans in just a moment. First of all, I want to say I used to daydream when I probably should have been paying attention in algebra class or something like that. I used to daydream of being interviewed by Robyn Flans for Modern Drummer when I was just a kid. I thought about, what questions would Robyn ask me and how would I answer them? Never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine that I would have the privilege of interviewing Robyn Flans for a podcast that was mine. First of all, podcasts didn't exist back in the late Paleolithic era when I was a kid, but you know what I mean. Guys, Robyn Flans has been writing for many, many, many years. If you're not hip to the work she did with Modern Drummer back in the day, go find those back issues of Modern Drummer, because she was the preeminent interviewer for that magazine for many, many years. She has a great new book out called It's About Time, Jeff Porcaro, the Man and His Music. Robyn was great friends with the legendary Jeff Porcaro, and I just couldn't think of somebody better to write a biography on Jeff, and she has nailed it with this. And if you listen all the way through this interview, you are going to have the opportunity to win a copy of this book courtesy of Robyn Flans. So we thank her for that. So without further ado, help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Robyn Flans. Hey, good morning, Robyn. How are you today?
I am terrific, Jamie. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. We've finally got some cold weather here in Kentucky. It was a balmy 28 degrees this morning. So,
oh gosh. Well, it's nice here in Los Angeles, so.
I'm sure it is. You know, I jokingly said to you, if I could have Kentucky traffic and California weather, I'd really be doing something, right?
I get that.
So
I just stay at home. I don't go out in the traffic.
Well, that's probably wise. You know, it's you're taking your life into your own hands if you get on the 5 freeway out there. But
that's true.
Yeah. So, well, hey, thank you so much for taking time to come on the Drum Shuffle. We really appreciate it. We're looking forward to this one.
Thank you for your interest. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, there's a lot to dig into. You know, I am not trying to date anyone here, okay? But when I started drumming way back in 1988, you know, I was one of those kids that begged my mom for drums, and I finally got a drum set. And the music store where we bought my first kit, the guy said, "Here, I'm going to throw in this month's Modern Drummer," right?
Mm-hmm.
And immediately that opened up a whole world to me. You know, I had MTV and Modern Drummer, and every month, typically, there was Robyn Flans. You know, so many cover stories that you did for Modern Drummer over the years. I'm curious, you know, what is the origin of Robyn Flans? Where did you grow up, and how did you get involved? I mean, obviously you're a great journalist, but how did you get involved in the drumming side of things?
By 88, I was already writing for Modern Drummer for, I think, about 11 years. I mean, to sort of rewind really quickly, I was a theater arts major at UCLA. I decided, I had wanted to do that for my whole childhood. And then at the last minute, I decided I wasn't cut out for that sort of rejection. And and decided that my other love really was music. And the Beatles had really started it all in me, like most of you musician types.
Yeah.
But I didn't play an instrument. And what other thing did I love to do but write? And so I contacted Billboard magazine, which of course is the Bible in those, kinds of things. And I asked the woman who was in charge of reviews, whose name I still remember, Jean Williams, and asked her if I could do reviews. And interestingly enough, she said, "Hey, I'll give you a shot. Why don't you come in and show me some reviews you've done?" Well, of course, I hadn't done any. So I went to all these local clubs and just wrote, reviews on the cocktail bands.
Okay.
And I brought them in, and she said, "Okay, I can see that you're, good at this. I'm going to give you a review to do." Believe it or not, she sent me out to the Greek Theater. My first real professional review was for Billboard magazine on Chicago.
Nice.
And they had just changed labels to CBS, and they threw this huge party for them up at the observatory, which is connected to the Greek Theater. They shuttled all of us up. It was this big bacchanalian feast. I thought this was, what the music world was going to really be like. This was one of a kind, let me tell you. It was amazing. anyway, I did this review. It was published. I mean, it was amazing. My first, shot out of the gate. And then I went home and I thought, what can I do with this? How can I parlay this into something? So sure enough, I thought to myself, what do I really love about music? Well, I was always attracted to the drums. I mean, to me, that was the foundation of the music. When I listened to music, my head was going up and down, up and down. When I listened to the Beatles, it was Ringo. I mean, I'm not saying he was my favorite Beatle. I really loved all of them, but it was the thing I gravitated towards.
Well, yeah, drummers are the cool guys in the band, right? I mean,
well, yeah, and it's the thing that I feel.
Yeah,
it's the thing. It's the thing.
Right.
So I found out about this thing called Modern Drummer. I don't know. I don't even remember how I found out about Modern Drummer because, of course, there wasn't the internet. But I did some research and I found out there was a magazine. I think I went to the newsstand.
Okay.
That's what I did in those days. I went to the newsstand and I looked at all the magazines, and there was Modern Drummer and Guitar Player and all these magazines, but Modern Drummer was what I zeroed in on. And I looked up the phone number and I called the magazine and I suggested, because I had just done this review on Chicago, that they do a story on Danny Seraphine.
Yeah. So now when you called, did you get Ron Spagnardi on the phone?
No,
I mean, okay.
I spoke with, at the time, the editor was a gal, but that was her first editor by the name of Karen Larcombe.
Okay.
And little did I know, they were still working in the garage.
Yeah, well, at that time, weren't they still just a quarterly? I mean, they weren't monthly at that time, were they?
No, they weren't monthly.
Okay.
I think they were still a quarterly.
Okay.
It was 1978. And I spoke to Karen. She since became one of my closest friends in the world and still is. But she listened to what I had to say. She took it to Ron. I think he got on the phone with me. What I said to them, of course, I played myself up. I write for Billboard.
Of course. Well, yeah, that's exactly what you say.
Right. I did one review, right?
It doesn't matter. You write for Billboard. It does not matter. That's perfect.
And so I said, and my most recent review was on Chicago, and it occurred to me, blah, 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 blah. And so he said, yeah, that's a really good idea. And it seems to me he should be on the cover. So my first story out of the gate was a cover story for Modern Drummer.
Nice.
And Danny and I, we became friends from the very first out of the gate. We did it around his pool. And, all these years later. So, I mean, that's, in a nutshell, why drums? It just, to me, it was just that I gravitated. And, from there, I just became their go-to LA person. I mean, we joked through the years that I was their LA office. Of course, did I get the perks? No, I never got, insurance. I never got, I was an independent contractor all those years. People thought I was sort of on staff. No.
Yeah.
And so because of that, of course, they never paid very well. It was more a labor of love. and I had to write for other magazines. What most people who followed me at Modern Drummer never knew, I worked for People magazine. I worked for In Touch magazine through the years. I was on staff for a while at Soap Opera magazine.
Oh, wow.
I worked for Country Weekly for years. I started Country Weekly magazine with them. I covered all the main events for People magazine, the Golden Globes, the Emmys, the Oscars. I did a whole lot of work for other people who paid me way more than Modern Drummer ever paid me.
Sure. Well,
and I continued to work for them because it was a love.
Yeah, and I think just for our listeners that aren't aware, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but Modern Drummer literally started out of Mr. Spagnardi's garage, and it was basically a newsletter, and it has grown into what it is today. But they're still, to this day, as far as I know, headquartered in New Jersey, correct?
Right.
Okay.
And Ron did, and I've told this story many times, but don't know how many people have heard it. He did something that I don't know if he knew it was illegal at the time, but he's gone anyway, and I don't think he can get in trouble for it 40 years later. But he took subscription money before there was a magazine. He announced the magazine and used that money to create the magazine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he created a magazine when there wasn't any magazine. I mean, he did this independently. There was a guitar player that had bass and keyboards, and they were a company. They were a whole company that did all the other instruments, but they didn't have drums.
Yeah. Well,
and Ron saw the marketplace.
Yeah, and for our younger listeners, now you've got, I don't know how many different monthly drumming magazines. I can think of 3 or 4 right off the top of my head, but back in those days,
and some of them have gone out of business.
Yeah, correct. Yes. But back in the day, there was nothing for drummers.
That's right. There was nothing.
And he's the one that, they're the granddaddy of them all, obviously.
That's right. He was a drummer. He saw the need, and he took the subscription money and he started it in his garage, and he pulled it off.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have gotten in a lot of trouble taking that money and not pulling it off.
Right.
But he pulled it off. He ended up being able to buy a building to create his passion in it. And he did very well. I loved Ron. Ron was a good man, a fair man. I was really sad when he left the planet. And, he was a great guy.
Yeah.
He was a visionary and a wonderful man.
Yeah, indeed. Now, I'm going to have a hard time getting this formulated in my brain. I jump down every rabbit hole on this show. You'll find that about me, but,
Go ahead.
You started writing for Modern Drummer very early on. I mean, I don't know exactly when he started the magazine, maybe 75, 76.
No, it was I want to say just about a year before I came aboard.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you became kind of the de facto, as you jokingly said, the LA office for Modern Drummer.
Yep.
And of course, them being in New Jersey, being headquartered there, they had access to all the New York jazz guys,
Correct.
And the New York scene. But at the time that you started writing for them, most of the action in popular music at that time was in LA and, remained that way for many, many years. So I'm assuming you were pretty busy, writing for them because, like I said, in the 80s, when I first started reading the magazine, I think you did probably, 8 out of 12 covers for them, each year.
Well, it got very busy. At first, like you said, I think it was quarterly, and then it became bi-monthly. It finally went monthly. I couldn't tell you what year that was, but probably by the time Rick Mattingly came on board. And I couldn't tell you what year that was either. I would have to ask Rick, who is also still a really good friend, by the way.
Yeah.
And Rick kept me very busy. But interestingly enough, because they were all New York guys, these editors and people that were in that building, I had a hard time sometimes convincing them of what was really happening in LA because they, the internet was not happening yet. And for instance, and Rick and I were just marveling about this recently because of my book on Jeff Porcaro, that when I did the first cover story on Jeff, let's back up. When I did the first interview that I did with Jeff in 1982, I had to convince him that it had to be a cover story.
Wow.
They were completely not on board. Completely.
That's amazing to me because, and we'll get into the book, but, by that time, Jeff was basically playing on every record.
That's right.
It was either him or Keltner, right?
Yeah. And I was saying to them, you have to understand, I'm not going to give you this interview unless you put him on the cover.
Wow.
And Jeff was good. I was telling Jeff this while it was going on. Jeff was going, "It's okay, Robyn. It's okay." And I said, "No, it's not okay. It's simply not okay." And I was telling Rick, "It's not okay."
Yeah.
And Rick said to me in an email, he said, "I'm really glad I trusted your instinct." This was just last week, he said to me in the email. He said, I was completely not with it. I didn't know.
Yeah. Well,
we were jazzers in New York. We were sitting at desks and we just didn't know.
And I think, and I don't want to get too much, inside baseball here, but, from their perspective, from the magazine's perspective, they want to put, guys and gals on the cover that will sell more magazines.
Well, that's the other thing. Session players, forgive me, are a little bit, quote, faceless.
Right.
But at that time, too, Toto was really starting to happen.
Yeah.
And I was convincing Rick, trying to convince him of that, too. Toto 4 was starting to really happen.
Yeah.
And and I was explaining to him that this was, imperative. So, in hindsight, it was a good thing he trusted my instincts, because we would have really looked stupid. But they didn't have a clue.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, we need to sell more magazines, more subscriptions, that sort of thing. And
correct,
not understanding the gravity of what's going on. And, I'm sure it still happens all the time. Why don't you have this guy in your magazine? Well, yeah, he may be a great drummer, or she may be a great drummer, but nobody knows who that is.
That's right.
So you have that stuff as well. Over the years, all the different drummers that you interviewed, are there any that besides Jeff, because we're going to talk a lot about Jeff, but are there any that really stick out in your mind of, I got to pinch myself that I'm interviewing this drummer?
Oh, God. Ringo. That was, like a highlight of my life. For God's sakes, he was the Beatles.
Yeah.
It was, for me, that was the pinnacle of pinnacles. That was, and still is. I've interviewed Ringo like 3 or 4 times, and he, I consider him a professional, more than an acquaintance. He knows who I am, and he requested my presence once at to listen to one of his albums, and that sort of made my life at the time, because I was feeling pretty down about where things were at in my career. So that really picked me up and made me feel like I could go on another day. That's been a biggie. So I feel so blessed, Jamie, that I can't begin to tell you that how I feel. I feel so rewarded, and I've maintained great relationships with so many people, and I was so blessed to have a great relationship with Earl Palmer and Hal Blaine. Hal Blaine came to my house for a housewarming in an apartment in Reseda, California. Hal Blaine!
Yeah, man.
Hal Blaine,
Well,
John Densmore came to my housewarming.
That's crazy.
From the Doors, who comes to a little apartment housewarming,
Well, I think that speaks volumes not only about you and how fairly you treated these guys as a journalist, but it says a lot about them as well, Yeah,
no, I know. They're normal, human beings that are just cool human beings that, I became really close to Ed Shaughnessy. I co-wrote with him his book, Lucky Drummer. We spent years working together on that. I became very close to him in his later years, his last years. He helped me out some when things got tough financially for me. I took him to his doctor's appointments, and every day I would go by his house and pick up his newspaper and his mail and walk it up to his front door, because he had a a steep driveway, and I didn't want him walking down that driveway. I lived really close by him, and I think it was God's blessing that I moved nearby him. That was meant to be. We just became really good friends. I miss him very much. He was a real blessing in my life. I know I'm saying that word a lot, but I do. I feel really blessed that, Vinny and I are close. He's somebody I can text anytime, and Keltner and I are good friends. He wrote the foreword in my book.
Yeah.
And told me he was honored, that it meant everything to him. So, I don't know. I've been so lucky, Jamie, that when you ask me if it, what it means, or if there's people that I'm blown away by all of it.
Yeah. Well,
Still.
And you know what? I know exactly what you're saying. I do, because, I've never been able to, make my full living as a musician. The geography is wrong for me. My talent level is wrong.
Well,
you
haven't gotten that chance.
Well, yeah. And that's okay. Not everybody can be a professional drummer, right? But I understand exactly what you're saying, simply because I've made so many friendships through this podcast, and not to name drop, but last week, I had, like a 30 or 40 minute call with Doug Clifford from CCR.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I've had him on the show a couple of times, but we've stayed in touch, and it never ceases to blow my mind when my phone rings and it's a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and all he wants is, "How are you, man?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just, all those things blow my mind. And
I know. I get it.
So I understand exactly what you're saying when you say, I've been so honored and so blessed with all these great things. I don't know that I could handle being in the same room with Jim Keltner. I would be like a tornado of word salad, just like every question, right?
And he's like, I text him just to say I love you.
That's awesome. That's so good.
Because I always want to make sure that the people in my orbit know that I love them. And I don't want to leave Steve Smith out, and I don't want to leave Rick Marotta out.
Yeah.
Because these are people that I feel, that I really truly care about.
Yeah.
And I just truly care about it.
Yeah.
When Steve did his art book, he asked me to do the bio and the big biography in it, and I was so honored that he chose me to do it. The Fabric of Light. That I was just so honored. So these are relationships that I've had for decades.
Yeah.
Decades.
Well,
really decades.
Speaking of writing a bio for Steve Smith, let's get a plug in here real quick. Okay. I know that you still do that work for anybody that wants you to write a bio for them. I know you'll do that.
I do.
So let's get a plug in to everybody that's listening. If you or your band needs a professional bio done, introducing yourself to the world, for your press kit, let me know. We'll get you in touch with Robyn, and she can do that work for you.
I happen to love it. It is one of my favorite things to do in the world. I I find it very artistic and very rewarding to paint the portrait of who you are. It's the most fun thing. I just did one for Bernie, Michael McDonald's guitarist. He's recommended me to so many wonderful people to do that work because I've been working with him for decades as well, because Michael McDonald actually recommended me to him decades ago. Michael and I go back a long way as well. So, yeah, I love that work.
Well,
I just love that work.
We're going to send some folks your way. So,
okay.
Including myself, my bio could certainly use a little bit of work. So, we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But let's get into the book, because that's the reason I wanted to have you on the show. I said to you when we were setting up this interview time, I had reached out a while back and just wanted to have you on the show just to talk about all these interviews. And you were like, well, what was I promoting when you reached out? And I was like, you weren't promoting anything. I just wanted to get you on the show to talk, but as it turns out, I'm holding in my left hand right now the new book. It's About Time, Jeff Porcaro, the man and his music. And I have gotten through 90% of the book. I ran out of time, so I still have just a little bit to go, but this is such a well-written book. It fills I think a massive gap for people that are curious about Jeff. And I know that you were very, very close to Jeff and his dad, for many, many years. Yeah. There's so much in the book that was a revelation to me. Like, I love the Ron Howard story. That blew my mind. That
was a revelation to me.
And I don't want to give away too much, because everybody should own a copy of this book for their library. If you're into any drumming at all, this is a must-own book. But when Jeff was a kid, starting up his first garage bands, Ron Howard, who at the time was, Opie on the Andy Griffith Show, came over to jam with the Porcaro kids. And he was like, they were really serious and I was not. I was out of my depth. It blew my mind that Ron Howard jammed with Jeff Porcaro when they were kids. It just blew me away.
So it blew me away too. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you the backstory, which I haven't told before.
Ooh, an exclusive. All right. Now we're talking.
It's an exclusive. So Joe Porcaro mentioned it casually to me that Ron Howard had come over to the house. And it sounded really far-fetched to me. And, a journalist has to check.
Sure.
You can't just put something in a story, and particularly when it sounds pretty far-fetched. So I reached out. I emailed Steve Porcaro, and by the way, they were at my beck and call. They were so wonderful. All the Porcaros, Steve Lukather, David Page, they were so wonderful. Anytime I had a question, and David Hungate, if anybody could answer a question, they would email me right back. They were wonderful. So I emailed Steve Porcaro. I knew Jolene was way too young to have a memory of that, but Steve Porcaro said, I don't remember this. So I thought, oh no, what am I going to do with this? It's too good to let go of, but I can't just put it in the book. So I called Ron Howard's office. I talked to his assistant. I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I really need an answer. Can you just ask your boss? I'm writing this book on Jeff Porcaro, and he was and I give her the background because she sounds too young to know who the hell Jeff Porcaro is. I said, he was the founding member, and this is what his father said, and blah, 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 blah. Could you just ask him if it's true or false? That's all I want. So, like 2 weeks go by. I write it on my calendar. I check back with her. She says, I haven't had a chance to ask him. He's working on this whatever big, huge project. And I said, okay, I'll check back with you. So, like a month goes by. I call her back. Oh, he's working on, God's project. I said, okay, I'll call back in another week. So finally, I called her back. She said, you know what? Ron would like to call you.
Oh, wow.
I said, what? She said, yeah, he'd like to call you. Can I have your number? He said he would call you on the way home from work tonight. Okay, then.
Yeah. No, I'm busy tonight. Tell me.
Yeah, right. So it turns out that it was so important to him that he wanted to talk about it.
That's amazing.
So Joe was right. And you'll have to read it in the book now. I've told you all I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic story. And, there were quotes in there from Ron Howard himself. So, not only are you friends with Hal Blaine and John Densmore that come to your, housewarming, but, you're now friends with Ron Howard, one of the most powerful movie directors in all of Hollywood. So that's amazing.
It was just amazing. All I wanted was for him to confirm or deny, and he wants to talk.
That's great. And it's a great story. And it's one of those things that, I tell everybody, you're only about 3 emails away from anybody on earth. I say that all the time. And, it's amazing how intertwined everything really is universally. But so Robyn, I'm curious, again, I know you were very close to Jeff, before his very untimely passing. I mean, he was a young guy when he passed. How difficult was it for you to write this book? I know it was a mission for you. Did you?
It was really hard.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was very loving and very hard at the same time. Look, I was tasked with having to write his tribute for Modern Drummer.
Yeah.
The minute he passed away. You want to talk about hard?
Yeah.
I cried for months, and I had to interview people the minute he passed away.
Yeah.
It was the most horrible time. It was dreadful. It was horrible, and everyone understood I had to do it. And they were there for me. I mean, they bought Skaggs and I mean, all of them, Gary Katz, and I mean, it was horrible. I just remember the time and the crying and it was just miserable. This wasn't that. This was tears, but it was also, it was very cathartic for people. I mean, speaking of Gary Katz, I mean, he and I really bonded through this. And if people don't know, he was the Steely Dan producer. And for him, he kept saying to me, this feels like I needed to talk about Jeff. For a lot of these people in the book that were talking to me, that were being interviewed, they really, I mean, they miss him too. I mean, not just the people reading the book who have been waiting for a book on Jeff, but the people I interviewed really miss him too and really wanted an outlet to express their feelings.
Yeah.
So for everybody, it was very cathartic, and I'm glad that I could give them the outlet. I mean, some of us cried together. Jimmy Webb, you know, I mean, the story he told made me cry. I could hear the tears, you know, form from him as he told me his story. And when Jim Keltner got his book, he texted me and told me he had started it and got to the first couple of chapters and wept the whole time. So I guess for everyone, it's been a real, I guess it's just been an experience that everybody's needed to go through. And for me too. I mean, it took me 8 years and stops and starts like I write in the preface, but now I'm feeling an empty hole. I miss Jeff so much. And,
yeah,
you know, I miss him.
Well, obviously I never had the honor of meeting him, but here's the thing. I often wonder, about all of my drumming heroes that have left this mortal coil that we call home.
Yep.
I always wonder, what would it have been like if John Bonham had recorded up into his 60s? What would it be like if Jeff Porcaro was still playing, 8 studio sessions a week in LA?
I know.
Would he today be doing drum tracks from his home remotely like so many others do? It's those questions that I think about all the time, and how much amazing music we've missed out on because they're gone.
Yeah. And for sure he'd be producing.
Without a doubt. And
because he was starting to when he left.
Well, gosh, dare I say, he produced the Toto records in his own kind of, strange roundabout way. But, he was just, how many drummers are still trying to perfect the Rosanna shuffle? I mean, I still can't play it the way he did.
I know. Nobody can because everybody's DNA is different.
That's right. And, so I just, when I read through the book, that was the feeling that came over me was, disappointment in the fact that, I didn't get to live through the heyday. I'm looking at it in my rearview mirror. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, of course.
And it was just, gosh, what would it be today? But it's a fantastic read. And I know it took you a long time to write this,
And I didn't feel ready to give it away either. I mean, I feel like and what's awful is that people are still approaching me with, I wish I had known, I have a story, and there's, I feel like, oh my God, I could have gone on forever. I wish I still had the book and I could be writing more. And I want to be, because I feel like I'm not ready to let go still.
Well,
It's awful.
Maybe that's a calling to write part 2, and if it takes 8 years, I'll be here. So we'll do part 2 when you write part 2.
Oh God.
But that's the thing. People always come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, I wish I had known. I would have added this story to it." But at some point, I say this to a lot of my musician friends who are, sweating bullets over their next release. When Springsteen was doing Born to Run, he had done, 8 million glockenspiel overdubs and tambourines and all that stuff. And finally, I don't know who it was. It may have been George Landis, but somebody said, dude, at some point you got to just put it out, give it wings, put it out in the world and see what happens. Enough is enough,
I know.
So we're all thankful that it's out there in the world. And I know that it's been out for...
He got to write another song.
Yeah.
But then he got to... and I just feel curtailed. I feel lost. I feel sad. I feel like my baby, had wings and it's flying and I'm left behind somehow.
Well, except for the massive truckloads of money that are that are surely on the way.
I don't think that's going to be a thing. Books don't. They just don't.
Yeah.
Well, I'll leave it at that word. They just don't. But that was never the motivation anyway.
Of course. But the reaction has been fantastic so far.
Yeah, the reaction. What I'm happy about is that it's giving people, like I said, a place to put their feelings. And somehow a place to where they left off missing him, a feeling of a reconnection.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the joy. I was worried, I was worried that it wouldn't resonate like that. And so for me, I'm doing a dance. I'm so happy that people are feeling like they're getting something out of it. That's all for me. That's what it's about. And that makes me so happy. But I do feel a loss. That's just the personal piece of it, that
Sure.
I just feel a great, great loss.
Sure, of course. I mean, and that's the other thing, I guess, there's the old adage that, don't get too close to your subjects, as, but you can't help it, right? I mean, you guys were so close for so many years. I can't imagine anybody being any better suited to write this book than you.
Well, that's always the yin and the yang, isn't it, Jamie?
Yes, it is.
When you get close, you can lose a lot. But you also, what do they say? It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess that pretty much sums it up.
Yep, pretty much. Well, so one more thing that I want to talk about in the book that just amazed me. And I want you to add some color to this. And I don't want to give too much away, but at one point in here, there's a story of Jeff. I think he may have been in the studio with Steely Dan, and he got very frustrated and kind of threw his sticks down. And I think the quote was, "I can't play shuffles, get somebody else to do it." And, my jaw kind of dropped open because this is a guy that's known for one of the greatest halftime shuffles of all time.
Yeah.
So
he never thought he could play a shuffle.
Well, good God, man. I mean, what are the rest of us mere mortals?
He never thought he could play a shuffle.
Well, so when you heard that story, were you like, this sounds far-fetched as well, or?
No, because I knew that he always thought he couldn't play a shuffle.
I just don't.
Always.
It doesn't compute because
and he was uncomfortable, and it was his, what's the word I'm looking for? Not nemesis. It was it was the thorn in his side. It was the one thing that he felt he wasn't good at. Yeah, it was as bad as the stupid quote he gave me in one of the interviews, "My time sucks." I mean, the guy was a human clock.
Yes, he was.
But he also thought that he couldn't play shuffles.
So I wonder if it's just the sheer tenacity of him as a musician that, if he felt I can't do this well, or this is, my kryptonite, if you will, is that why he spent so much time perfecting it and being such a badass at doing it? I'm just curious.
Maybe. But I think he admired Bernard Purdie so much that he was never going to feel like he could do that the way he did.
Yeah.
And I think, and are you referring to the story where he broke his thumb?
No, but that was pretty amazing as well, that he, cut a Steely Dan track with a broken thumb.
Right. Because that was also, I think, he got aggravated and threw the sticks down and walked away. Yeah, Jeff was, very hard on himself and very, just didn't believe that he was as good as he was. I mean, that was just Jeff.
Yeah. Well, and there's a great quote in here from Keltner, and again, don't want to give too much away, but one sentence, Jeff really looked up to Jim Keltner, and I think Keltner said, "Knock it off, man. You're Jeff Porcaro. Stop with that. Stop with that. You're Jeff Porcaro. Get over it. Like you're the dude. Stop talking about me being the dude. You're the dude."
That's right. At some point, Jeff became the guy to look up to, and he didn't get it. Jeff didn't get it. He just didn't.
Well, obviously, we're still trying to disseminate and replicate what he brought to the table, all of us, to this day.
I know.
And the good news about being an artist, is you leave a lot of stuff behind that everybody gets to enjoy for all of mankind. And,
I know.
So not only do we get to listen to his amazing playing, we now have this amazing book that recounts his life. So for that, we're all indebted to you, Robyn. It's a great book. It really is.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, the great thing about Jeff is that he worked so much and, 3 and 4 sessions a day. So thankfully in his horribly short life, we have a huge amount of work. And the discography and the book was a lot of work, thanks to, Joe really worked hard on that. But it he amassed a great amount of work in his short years. So we're very lucky.
He did indeed. And, I'm curious too, you may not have the answer to this, but are there things that are still sitting in some studio archive someplace that we haven't heard yet, or do you know?
I don't know for sure. I think Toto has finally released what has been sitting, but I really honestly don't know if they've released everything. So I won't say.
Okay. Well,
I don't know.
When you play as many sessions as Jeff did, there's a lot of takes that don't get used. And I just wonder, somebody out there someplace should do whatever they can to get that together and just put it out. Because his throwaway stuff is better than most guys.
You are so right, Jamie. You are so right.
Yep. Just amazing. Well,
true.
Robyn, I want to be respectful of your time. A couple of things that I want to get to before we let you go. Number one is I have an extra copy of the book sitting here, and I am very thankful that you sent me an extra copy to give away to one of our listeners. So I'm going to do this. Pick a number, say between 1 and 20.
17.
All right. So the 17th listener, after this episode publishes, the 17th that emails me and says, I want the book, you will get a free copy of It's About Time, Jeff Porcaro, The Man and His Music from Robyn Flans. Thank you, Robyn, for giving one away to one of our listeners. So we will get that out to whomever that person may be. Lastly, before we let you go, we always ask all of our guests for a good piece of advice. And it's typically, to take into our day-to-day drumming routines or, into the studio, onto a gig or whatever. But your legendary career of journalism, talking to all these drummers, what have you learned that you would impart on other drummers?
Well, I would impart always be on time, always be upbeat. I don't mean on your instrument. I mean in the room. Always have a smile like Jeff did. Always play for the music. Never showboat. Always care about what you're doing. And always listen. Have big ears.
Yeah.
That's right. That sums it up.
Yep. That's all really, really good advice. I joke on this show all the time. The day I figured out it's not about the notes I play, it's about the notes I don't play. The day I figured that out, I got a whole lot more work.
That's right.
So, well, Robyn, thank you so much for your time. Again, excellent book. Everybody go get a copy of this. I know it's available wherever you can find books, but it's published by Hudson Music, great music publisher up in New York. You can go directly to their website and get it. Again,
it's also available on Amazon, and it's available on Kindle, and yeah. So make sure you pick up a copy. It's a great read. It is not a 1,200 page tome. You can get through this book in a few days. Some biographies, how this goes, Robyn. Some of them, it's the size of a. I've been told very easy.
Yes, it is an easy read, and that's it was a joy for me. And I've got just a couple of chapters left, and the discography at the back. So I'm looking forward to finishing it up. But we've got to have you back on the Drum Shuffle. So we'll we'll plan on a part 2.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jamie. It's been my pleasure.
No. It's been all our pleasure, and we will absolutely have you back and talk to you real soon.
Thank you much.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode 118 of the Drum Shuffle podcast. 1,000,001 thanks to Robyn Flans for taking time out of her schedule to come on the show. It was a real treat for me to have her on the show and to get to talk about this book and just some of her history with modern drummer. So just as a quick reminder, the 17th email that I get at the drumshufflepodcast@gmail.com, I will mail you a free copy of It's About Time, Jeff Porcaro, the man and his music. You will get a copy in the mail from me, 17th emailer. As always, I'm going to ask you to hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, star rating, review, whatever you can do to help spread the word of the Drum Shuffle podcast is greatly appreciated. And we simply cannot do this without each and every one of you guys tuning in and week out. Again, we are off next week, but I will be back the week after that. We're going to be joined again by the great Jeff Williams. I always feel like I've talked to a Zen master after speaking with him, so you're not going to want to miss that. We answer every single email that we get here. It's the drumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can find more information on me over at jamieeads.com. So until next time, may your heads stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.